Perch, and we're going to go there. So we're talking about, wait, I'm talking about Harry Potter. So Harry Potter, it's funny because Harry Potter is slowly evolving from a pretty unknown book that bookstores, Walden Books, and yeah, Walden Books. It goes back that far. Really got to hyping, and then it became a series that was just so much bigger than life, where you had kind of midnight releases of a book, and it was cool, really cool to see Barnes and Noble and bookstores like opening up at midnight to sell a Harry Potter book. I mean, you know, I love things like that. I love kind of when the excitement of a property is so big that like you can't wait for the next morning. You've just got to have it now. And so we're going to do that big midnight opening. I just think that's awesome. And I think there's not nearly enough things that are like that. And then you had the movies, and the movies are big, and they're making all kinds of money. And then you had this interesting generational thing where the books took a while. Like you could grow up on those books. There's a good like 15 years of between number one and number seven. I think that's about right. Maybe less, maybe more. I don't know, but let's say 15 years, something like that. And um, you have this. You have the people who are going from reading kind of their first big book with little pictures. Um, somebody who's 15 starts reading Harry Potter, and now they're 30 when it's out. I mean, that you kind of live your life with Harry Potter, and that's why there's so many people who have a deep kind of emotional attachment to Harry Potter, and why you get some of that kind of really intense nostalgia. And what's funny is that those people who grew up with Harry Potter in that way, they are parents, a lot of them now, and they're trying to really push the Harry Potter books on their kids. And it's funny because I see a lot of other parents and kids, and they're like, "Hey, it's Harry Potter. You want to watch the movies? You want to read the books?" They're very excited to share kind of that piece of their childhood with their kids. But the thing is, it doesn't work that way. There's something unique and magical about growing up with a book, and you can't just insert that into somebody else's life. It's somewhat the same of if you grew up with the Nintendo and Super NES, and then the 64, and then the GameCube, and I've forgotten one, I'm sure, and then there's the Wii, and then there's the Wii U, and now the Switch. I mean, you've grown up with Nintendo, from kid to adult, and so you can't, you have very fond memories of those old, like Mike Tyson's Punch Out cartridge, and you're going to put it in there, and you have fond memories of that. But if you take your kids, like a 12-year-old boy, and say, "Hey, we're going to do something really cool. Here's Mike Tyson's Punch Out," and you put it in there, the kid's like, yeah, this is so crappy. This is the worst looking game of all time, and I'm what's supposed to punch the fat guy so his pants fall down. What, I don't get it. That's kind of what's happening with Harry Potter, because a lot of the kids I notice reject Harry Potter. They're like, they don't want to be dragged through this thing. And the other thing is, some of those books. It's also funny. The books grew up with the audience. So if you read and or listen to or whatever the first Harry Potter book, the Sorcerer's Stone, listen to the first one. It's very innocent, very charming. Kind of nice little things are happening. Draco's like, being kind of mean. And then you get to like book 6, and Draco's like, "I'm gonna murder you," and like it's like, whoa, crap got real. They there's there was an evolution of those characters into a more adult settings, more adult things. You have your first kind of death kind of take place in book 4, and then it's like there's a death in every book, and Dumbledore's dying, and there's funerals and politics, and I'm like, it gets super complicated. And so, again, parents who are excited to share this stuff with their kids, they'll show the first one. The kid's like, "Well, okay. I mean, I'm a little young. I'm like, there's somebody I know who's like, their kid is 6, and they're like, they're gonna read all the Harry Potter books." And I'm going, "Well, that's gonna go okay until you get to like the third one with the werewolf, and then your 6-year-old's gonna be like, what the hell, mom?" And God help you when you're getting to like the last book where he's gonna stab the little locket with the sword, and blood's gonna come gushing out of the eyes that are. It's like, okay, this is not appropriate for a 6-year-old. I mean, or whatever. Maybe you have super advanced, awesome, your kids with it, and they've got their stuff together, and no problem. But most of the time, it's just not going to sit land. And so I was in this area where there's these parents, and they're kind of bemoaning the fact like, oh, my kids don't like Harry Potter, but it's also a source of pride because the parents are like, well, my child's reading Harry Potter, nah, nah. What's your child reading? Oh, they're reading the you know grade 3 Sunshine Princess Fairy book. Oh well, I clearly have a smarter child. It's like, well, you're just forcing this book on on your poor kid who doesn't understand why in the world. I mean, you can't go from Paw Patrol over to Harry Potter and expect anything good's going to come of that. But why? That was a long lead in for Harry Potter. What do we know from about Harry Potter, and what does this have to do with comics? Well, I think Harry Potter teaches us some interesting is an interesting lessons, interesting examples of how to treat a property. I think whether you like Harry Potter or not, J.K. Rowling did create a very immersive, very detailed environment for the characters. She worked a lot on character development. Not all characters, and kind of a mix of character development. So some characters like Ron, Harry's friend Ron, goes from kind of funny face sap in book one to pretty much sap in book seven. I mean, he grows a little bit. He dates, I guess, but there's not a lot of like character growth in Ron. He's, you go back, you read the first book and you read the last book, and you can recognize that Ron. And Harry definitely grows. He's got some aging things, but Harry's got the whole chosen ones thing going on. Hermione, interestingly enough, she's a pain in the butt know it all in book one, and at times she's a pain in the butt know it all in book seven. But yet you feel like these characters have grown because the writing and the kind of immersive world of which they put these characters in, and they have things kind of reacting around the characters, is very it's complex. And so because it's so complex, it means there's more things that the characters are able to do and react off of, and it creates the feeling of a very not dense but complex world, and that's to the benefit of the story. It makes everything seem more complex and more advanced, and so it's kind of a cheat. I think when you do really good with world building, which writers like Remender or Hickman do very very well, they create really complex worlds. It gives you a nice crutch as a comic to lean on, where whether or not your characters are evolving, and if you're working for the big two, how much can you really evolve Spider-Man? You can do things with him, you can have him in moments, but the real power you get is kind of getting his immersive world to kind of turn around, and that's where that sits. Um, but I think Harry Potter. So I mean, it's got a lot of hate online and it's really kind of what I mentioned at the beginning. It's a lot of millennials who grew up with Harry Potter who now won't shut up about Harry Potter, and you know, but in reality, it's just a book. It's a book. It's a story. It's got a somewhat immersive kind of environment. She's doing all the world building stuff. She's created a very complex world. She, for whatever reason, won't do it. Her integrity as a writer won't let her do it, I guess. But she's created enough of a world that she could go and write 50 spin-offs at this point and just milk that franchise for even more money. And she absolutely should. She's nuts to not get in there and just create more with this environment. And the whole whatever it is, Dopey McDopeface and the Magical Creatures, whatever that spin-off movie series is. That's not what I'm talking about. That's the you create the world of Harry Potter, and then you've got these rando characters that it just don't land. I mean, it's also hard to go from like you've got Snake Villain uh, in one, and he's got all of his followers, and it's super serious and everything else. And then we're going to do a prequel, and we're going to try and convince you, no, there's another. You've got Wizard Hitler over here, and he's super dangerous too, but we know he's not that dangerous because he gets defeated by the time we have the new book. So really, we're just kind of hanging out to see how he's going to be defeated, but we know he's going to be defeated. So it's like you can't. I think you can't go back and do a prequel where you absolutely know that the villain is going to be defeated and not a threat, without having to have a really good story in there. You can't just kind of say, "Hey, no, there's this super other threat you didn't know about," but yeah, we means it for reals. It's threatening. But what is that guy's name? Um, God, I cannot. I'm completely blanking. That last movie was terrible. That's what I remember. It's just an awful movie. I keep thinking Lemony Snicket, but that's a whole other book series. Who is that? Yeah, he's got a suitcase full of animals and he's running around trying to do stuff. I don't know. Ah, well, whatever. Um, now I'm not going to get off of it. Anyway, I think there's a lot of lessons for comics here. There's a lot of really good things that that Harry Potter teaches us about how to build a universe and how to have characters and how to mine those characters and how to get them to react. And also the arc of, you have, very familiar setup, very familiar middle, very familiar end. And that, if you can get a story that kind of bounces around like that, appeals to a mass audience, I think you're onto a really good property. For all the people who talk about Harry Potter, and a lot of current comic writers and comic creators talk over and over and over about Harry Potter, they talk about it, but they seem to have completely missed the lessons that series gives us around what makes it popular and why it's good and why it's a mass market kind of thing. They want to take kind of the certain aspects of the Harry Potter franchise and kind of dismiss the other part, which is you know the how to appeal to a wide audience. Because all of Rowling's kind of crazy retcons of her characters came after the series was long done. She didn't do that during the middle of the series. She was smart enough not to, while the cash cow is producing the cash and building up its power, that's not the time to like start, saying, "Hey, did you realize that you're a big jerk to the fans?" You do that later. You get your money, then you insult them. You got to do it. You got to do it in that order. When you do it the other way, it goes backwards. Anyway, what do you think, Harry Potter? Are you into it? Do you listen to it? Read it? I just keep saying listen because I like the audiobooks. It saves me. I'm lazy. I don't have to read. Um, but that, what do is there a connection to comics? What do you think? What is there really to learn from this super mega franchise that is worth billions and billions of dollars that comics could learn from? I think there's a lot of little lessons in there. What do you think? Leave a comment, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perk. And Newt Scamander. That's it. That's Funny McFunny Face. It's Newt Scamander. A weird name. Plus, he likes, as I recall from that last movie, he likes his girls to look like lizards. Something very, no, no, thank you. Hey, thanks for listening.